Welcome to Dialogues for Change. Life is not a void to be filled. It is a plenitude to be discovered. Today, I would like to share some thoughts with you by Noam Chomsky, which are taken out of a beautiful book by Harry Kreisler, Political Awakenings, which actually is a selection of some of the interviews he did in his series Conversations with History. If you don't know this series, Conversations with History, I really very much advise you to go on the internet, to go on YouTube, and to check them out and to watch them. They're really amazing. So the first interview that is reproduced in his little book is by Noam Chomsky. And part of it is about how to go about to move in the direction of social change. So the question is, what is your advice for people who have the same concerns, who identify with the tradition that you come out of, and who want to be engaged in opposition? Answer: the same as the factory girls in the Lowell textile plant 150 years ago. They joined with others. To do these things alone is extremely hard, especially when you're working 50 hours a week to put the food on the table. Join with others, and you can do a lot of things. It's got a big multiplier effect. That's why unions have always been in the lead of development of social and economic progress. They bring together poor people, working people, enable them to learn from one another, to have their own sources of information, and to act collectively. That's why everything is changed. The civil rights movement, the feminist movement, the solidarity movement, the workers' movements. The reason we don't live in a dungeon is because people have joined together to change things. And there's nothing different now from before. In fact, just as in the last 40 years, we've seen remarkable changes in this respect. Go back to '62. There was no feminist movement. There was a very limited human rights movement. There was no environmental movement, meaning rights of our grandchildren. There were no third world solidarity movements. There was no anti-apartheid movement. There was no anti-sweatshop movement. I mean, all of the things that we take for granted just weren't there. How did they get there? Was it a gift from an angel? No. They got there by struggle. Common struggle by people who dedicated themselves with others, because you cannot do it alone. And their efforts made it a much more civilized country. It was a long way to go, and that's not the first time it happened, and it will continue. Next question. You believe that when you focus on heroes in the movement, that's a mistake, because it's really the unsung heroes, the unsung seamstresses, or whatever in this movement, who actually make a difference. Answer. Take, say, the civil rights movement. When you think of the civil rights movement, the first thing you think of is Martin Luther King, Jr. King was an important figure, but he would have been the first to tell you, I'm sure, that he was riding the wave of activism, that people who were doing the work, who were in the lead in the civil rights movement, were young, student nonviolent coordinating committee workers, freedom riders, people out there in the streets every day getting beaten and sometimes killed, working constantly. They created the circumstances in which a Martin Luther King could come in and be a leader. His role was extremely important. I'm not denigrating it. It was very important to have done that. But the people who were really important are the ones whose names are forgotten. And that's true of every movement that ever existed. Question. Is it the case that by seeing so much you understand that very little sometimes can be accomplished, but that may be very important? I don't think we should give up long-term visions. I agree with the factory girls in Lowell in 1850. I think wage slavery is an attack on fundamental human rights. I think those who work in the plants should own them. I think we should struggle against what was then the new spirit of the age, gain wealth, forgetting everybody but yourself. Yes, that's all degrading and destructive, and in the long term, I don't know how long, it should be dismantled. But right now there are serious problems to deal with, like 30 million Americans who don't have enough to eat, or people elsewhere in the world who are far worse off, and who are in fact under our boot. We are grinding them into the dust. Those are short-term things that can be dealt with. There's nothing wrong with making small gains, like the gains that I was talking about before, from the 60s until today. They're extremely important for human lives. It doesn't mean that there are not a lot of mountain peaks to climb. There are. But you do what's within range. The same in the sciences. You might like to solve the problems of, say, what causes human action, but the problems you work on are the ones that are right at the edge of your understanding. There's a famous joke about a drunk under a lamppost looking at the ground, and somebody comes up and asks him, "What are you looking for?" He says, "I'm looking for a pencil that I dropped." They say, "Well, where did you drop it?" He says, "Oh, I dropped it across the street." "Well, why are you looking here?" "This is where the light is." That's the way the sciences work. Maybe the problem you would like to solve is across the street, but you have to work where the light is. If you try to move it a little further, maybe ultimately you'll get across the street. The ending of these little thoughts by Noam Chomsky also make me think about this importance of dialogue, which goes hand in hand with working together. It's through dialogue with others that we also start to recognize problems we may not be aware of, but also solutions we may not be aware of, or different ways of being that we may not be aware of. So I hope that these little thoughts inspired you to work more together in dialogue with each other and share together on this Sunday, 2nd of March, 2014. Thank you.